Pioneer Works is proud to broadcast this intimate conversation between renowned author and physicist Alan Lightman and powerhouse artist and former resident Smirti Keshari. We hope you'll enjoy their thoughts on consciousness, AI, art, science, Smirti's new work, and Alan's new book, Probable Impossibilities. Musical interludes are courtesy the superstar cellist, Zoe Keating. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, everyone. I am Smirti Keshari, and I'm really excited that we're here with Alan Lightman. Alan is one of my favorite imaginative authors. He has had numerous wonderful books, including Einstein's Dreams and The Accidental Universe. And most recently, he's come out with Probable Impossibilities, Musings on Beginnings and Endings. And I really, fell in love with this book. It's science and it's poetry, which I think are two of the strongest hidden forces of helping us understand the world. And Alan is a physicist and a wonderful poet. And this book kind of takes you through the infinite big and infinite small. It's this beautiful exposition, and it starts off with how we all came from a mother. And it dives deeper into how we're made of atoms. The same atoms in the stars are the same atoms within us, and goes through different theories that have helped us make sense of the universe and ourselves, such as the Big Bang theory, such as synthetic creations of cells. He takes you through different writers from the past and scientists such as Aristotle, Pascal, Newton, Einstein. But what I personally love so much is it's quite such a visual book. Being a filmmaker, it's just was so visual, and it dealt with some of the it dealt a lot with memory and consciousness as well. And he defines consciousness as this biological effect of our neurons. And Ultimate presents this question: is consciousness also really overrated? Any book that can take you into all of those places is one that, at least for me, I have to pick up and put down and pick up and put down.
I don't agree with those people that say emotion is a data set.
Sure.
What can be a data set is the manifestations of emotion. You can see someone get angry. You can make a video of their face when they're getting angry. You can make a video when they throw a bottle across the room in anger. You can make a video of them kissing their partner, but that doesn't capture what the person is feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the first person experience of consciousness, this amazing feeling that we are in the world, that we're separate beings, separate from the rest of the world around us, that we have an I, an ego,
Mm-hmm.
that overwhelming feeling of consciousness, of being alive. It's a first person experience.
Yeah.
And sort of when you collect a data set, that's a third person action. And that does not capture the first person experience. There was a great philosopher named Thomas Nagel,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote a very influential essay, I think in the 1970s. And the title of it was, "What does it feel like to be a bat?"
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Question mark. And he describes the difficulty in understanding how another living being feels, and the difficulty of crossing this first person, third person divide. So when it comes to consciousness, which of course is even deeper than emotion, because we have to be conscious first. And I think that some non-human animals, many are conscious as well as humans. That even though as a materialist, I believe that consciousness is a brain activity, and it results from the electrical and chemical interactions between neurons in the brain.
Which, by the way, is one of my favorite definitions of consciousness.
I believe that consciousness, like all brain activities, results is rooted, I'll say, rooted in the material neurons in the brain and the interactions between them. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's a mystery how this magical first person experience emerges from the neurons. Mm-hmm. And we still don't understand that. I mean, philosophers, neuroscientists, psychologists still don't understand how that first person experience emerges from the material neurons. We can hook up electrodes to people and see what their neurons are doing when they have different experiences.
Yeah.
But that does not capture the first person experience. When we come to art, my wife is a painter. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that you know all about this as a filmmaker. That the most interesting paintings are the ones that have some asymmetry in them. You know, a dash of red paint in the upper left-hand corner or something mm-hmm. is not completely symmetrical. Those are the most interesting paintings. I wonder when you compose one of your films, and I've seen your great film, The Bomb, and it's very, very visual, and almost every frame is sort of like a painting. Do you think of the design of each frame? How do you think of the design of each frame?
Yeah. Oh man, I love thinking about this, and I love talking about this. It's interesting. I loved, you mentioned the book you mentioned in the book the word entropy, which I had never come across that movement from order to disorder and what that balance is. And I often think about it like a DJ set, and how, of course, like you could go to a gig where it's just like going up, up and up and up. But if you sort of like, you kind of have nowhere to go, you sort of need to follow this like bell curve of sorts, right? And it's not necessarily a formula, but you're taking people through this like emotional through line. And it was something that in the making of the film, Eric Slosher, Kevin Ford and I, we would often talk about, there would be questions like, well, when is the first mushroom cloud, for example? Because that's how we associate a nuclear weapon. But if you almost like show that first, where do you go? You sort of have to, before you know if something is good or bad, you have to be seduced by it, right? And so how are like humans like seduced by something, and how are they like turned on by something? So there's so much of like repetition and juxtaposition, and I think about that all the time because I can't think being still. I always need to go for a run or drive, and I've spent a lot of time in airplanes. And so when I'm in motion, that's when I can have a calmness. And so there's something about if you keep people in a rhythm and then they get used to it, and then right when, and then there are moments where you might want to like let go, but you don't. And so it's this like push and pull of tension. And sometimes people, I think there's like a natural tendency to want to like go big or, and this is one of the things that I think the band that we worked with in The Bomb does such a good job at, where someone might want to go really big, do drones because nuclear weapons are maybe evil. You still need to be like fascinated by the machinery. This is the most powerful machine ever built. And there's an ingenuity to its construct, right? The engineers of nuclear weapons, when they speak about it, there's pride involved. And even the scientists of the Manhattan Project, there's this sense, that they were at the forefront of something. So that's something I think about a lot, even while thinking through like movement of, how can you keep people almost in this hypnotic point of view. And right when they think they get it, that's when it's almost like you've hypnotized them. And now you can mess around and play with that, which is what's great about like montages as well, and Russian montage theory, which speaks to that in filmmaking.
seek? The total elimination, one day, of nuclear weapons from the face of the earth.
I'll melt you down. Goddess sun, pull me under. Foam's pouring out. Hidden one, night is wonder.
Both of my parents are scientists. And I think I was so interested in their world and the way they see the world, and thinking of it almost artistically. But it felt, I think for a lot of people and a lot of collaborators that I often work with, they feel like they don't quite have either the permission, or sometimes some of these ideas are so hard to make sense of artistically. What either advice, or how do you find that back and forth between science and art?
Well, if you're putting science into a film or a novel or a play,
Mm-hmm.
or a musical composition,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it cannot be didactic. That there are better vehicles for explaining science or teaching science. I think that a film or a novel or a play, it has to work first and foremost as a work of art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if the viewer ever feels like they're getting a lesson in physics 101,
Right.
then the game is over.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I loved about your film, The Bomb, is you had frames that showed some of the equipment of the
Mm-hmm.
bomb. You had diagrams. You even had pages of equations, but you didn't try to explain those equations. You just showed them as to me, to show that there's a scientific and technological underpinning behind the bomb. You were sort of conveying the culture of the bomb.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think that the way to put science and technology into works of art. I know that when I was writing my book, Einstein's Dreams,
Mm-hmm.
Which has 30 different versions of the way time might behave,
Yeah.
that I had to resist the temptation to try to explain each of the versions of time and how it might work mathematically and scientifically. That would have totally weighed down the book. It would have destroyed the book.
And Alan, when I read that book, I think I kept being like, how dare you? And I thought, this is incredible. Who gave you permission? And can I have that permission? It was, it's like, wait, we can do this?
You did. Well, that's what you did in your film, The Bomb.
Right.
You did that.
Right. Yeah. No, but it's just, and time, of course, but like, God, time has just been taught to us so linearly again and again and again. And the fact that you did that, and I love, because in Probable Impossibilities, I think it's in the beginning that you talk about this, but I have, I think that filmmaking and the human brain are almost the same exact thing, because basically you're able to do jump cuts, you're able to imagine different alternatives. And it's the truest of, like, filmmaking is sort of the psychedelic version of the human brain.
I hate it when I see a film or read a novel where everything is neatly wrapped up at the end.
Yeah.
I like to be haunted
Mhm.
at the end of a good film or a good novel, because if you're haunted, then you'll keep thinking about what you saw or what you read or a character or a scene. You'll keep turning it over and over in your mind, and there'll be far more staying power and provocation
Mhm.
from the film or the book if you're haunted at the end and you don't quite understand what happened. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. But then endings, though. I mean, we talk about the title of your book, Musings on Beginnings and Endings. I find endings to be one of the hardest things
Yeah.
in filmmaking,
Hmm.
and in any work of art. It's just, it's often this, like, even in another piece that I'm doing, everything is so clear in the ending. It's just, I always think it will reveal itself. Do you have any advice?
Well, an ending should definitely not be a summation.
Right.
I sometimes like to have an ending with a scene,
Hmm.
uh, and the scene has a metaphorical connection to the rest of the work, the what came before it.
Hmm.
But I try to avoid any kind of literal connection. But in terms of when you know that you're through, that's a tough one, and I don't have any good solution for that. I think you just have to feel it. I mean, when you're finished with a film, do you know when it's done, or do you think that you could do more and make it better?
Um, I don't necessarily. I think when you're finished, I think often of filmmaking happens in two stages. There is one where you sort of go inside with you or your collaborators and you're trying to make sense of what it is. And then there's a second part where you learn what it is from the point of view of others, because people, will come to you and have this interpretation. You had never even thought of that. Would you read us the beginning of the book?
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
I will tell you a thing that is both impossible and true. You were born from a tiny seed within your mother, and she was born from a tiny seed within her mother, and she from her mother, and so on, back and back through the dim hallways of time, until we arrive at a particular cave in Africa, 100,000 years in the past, with a particular woman sitting by a fire. That woman knew nothing of cities or automobiles or electricity, but if she could follow her daughters through time, we would eventually arrive at you. And if each of those daughters of daughters had pressed an inky thumb on a large piece of parchment, one following the other, there would today be several thousand thumbprints on that parchment, leading from that ancestral woman 100,000 years ago to your thumbprint today.
Wow. Because I love cutting and pasting after it, I'm going to read another part of your book where you talk about consciousness. I'm content with the illusion of consciousness. I'll take it. And I find a pleasure in knowing that 100 years from now, even 1,000 years from now, some of my atoms will remain in this place where I now lie in my hammock. Those atoms will not know where they came from, but they will have been mine. And some of them will once have been part of the memory of my mother dancing the bossa nova. And some will what will once have been part of the memory of the vinegary smell of my first apartment. Some will once have been part of my hand, and if I could label each of my atoms at this moment and print them with my social security number, which I love, someone could follow them for the next thousands of years as they floated in air mixed with the soil, become parts of particular plants and trees, dissolved in the ocean, and then floated again to the air. Some will undoubtedly become parts of other people, particular people. Some will become parts of other lives, other memories, and that might be a kind of immortality.
Thank you for reading that.
Alan, I think you've done it. And I have just one question, one sort of final question before we go. And it's a bit about sort of all of your books. Do you think you've been asking the same questions in all of your books? I'm just I'm curious about that, because I have a tendency to read 2 books at a time, and I'm reading Dante's Divine Comedy right now, and I finished yours, and I find that Dante was asking the same questions and answering them in a very different way, the 9 circles of hell. But do you think that you're asking the same questions in your books?
Yeah. I think the question is, who are we?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we come from? Where are we going? What are we made out of? Who are we? What are we?
Well, I think that's perfect. And I just want to thank you for being part of this, thanking Pioneer Works for putting this together, and Alan's book, Probable Impossibilities. It's on bookstores everywhere.
Well, I want to thank you, Smirti. I think you're a wonderful conversationalist, and
Thank you.
you're very creative. And I know you have a show that's about to open at Pioneer Works
in 45 minutes.
So thank you for taking the time when you're so busy with your own creative life. And I'm honored that you read the book.
This has been such a joy, and the seeds that you've planted have rippling effects with your books, and so thank you, Alan.
Thank you for tuning in to the Pioneer Works broadcast. For more information and an editorial counterpart to this conversation, please visit pioneerworks.org/broadcast.